Another day, another banger. Today we'll be going over the 3 original and, might I add, forgotten Punisher movies. This trilogy includes The Punisher 1989, The Punisher 2004, as well as Punisher Warzone. None of these movies link up together and do not relate at all. Each film starts from scratch and makes its own unique story. Without further ado, make sure you're comfortable and, as always, enjoy the recap. The Punisher 1989 opens with a television broadcast stating a lieutenant from the Franco crime family, Dino Moretti, was released from prison and acquitted of the murder of Officer Frank Castle and his family. However, with over 125 gang members dead by an unknown figure known as the Punisher, Dino should be scared.
Punisher, whoever he is. He'll find out what the word punished really means.
Once the gang leader leaves, a man on a bike decides to follow close behind. Once at his luxurious abode, the men go to check the property. Upstairs, a man comes in through the window and pulls out a knife. As the goons look around the building for any intruders, one of the men checks the walk-in wardrobe when he is sliced open from above. A second man is also sent to meet his maker, and just for the memes, the third one is also killed. As Dino walks in, he fires a shot, making the reporters excited. Dino walks out of his abode and falls dead to the ground as the Punisher reveals himself for the first time. Moving to the side, the house erupts in a fireball. Going to the Punisher's underground lair, we get to see his face for the first time, and goddamn is this guy the definition of Giga Chad. Frank Castle's backstory is something quite alarming though, as he remembers his wife and 2 daughters being blown to smithereens and murdered in front of his eyes, causing him to become the Punisher. Back at the crime scene from earlier, Lieutenant Jake Berkowitz, the head of the Punisher task force, tells the reporters to stop nagging him. He is then approached by the chief of detectives, who tells him the mayor has a message: to stop telling people that Frank Castle might be alive and might be the Punisher, as it is just a rumor. With Frank being an ex-cop, it makes their entire unit look bad. On his way out, Jake is approached by Detective Sam Leary, who wants to be his partner. Jake refuses her request and states he works alone. She continues asking though, using her achievements to state she is qualified, but Jake doesn't really care until she says she believes Frank Castle is the Punisher. He finally agrees to let her work with him at 9 a.m. sharp. The following day, the Mafia leader Mr. Franco arrives in his hometown. Jake is there to greet him and tells him he was running out of bait for the Punisher. At a restaurant later, we are introduced to Franco's son Tommy, alongside Tyrone. Tyrone tells his boss the situation is getting dire because of the Punisher, but Franco plans on uniting all the crime families together to rid themselves of useless wars and territories. With $500 million worth of product arriving soon, he plans to divide the families to secure the product, receive it, collect it, and finally distribute it for all of them to split and reap the profits. At a bar elsewhere, a man by the name of Shake tries to get a drink but is kicked out. In the alley outside, a toy truck comes with an entire bottle. Shake follows it, but it stops at the Punisher's feet. Seems Shake is a somewhat informant who tells Frank that the dope will arrive at Pier 30. However, all the families are working together now under the employment of Mr. Franco. On the water, it seems the families aren't quite used to playing nice with each other, but the Punisher will help them all reunite in hell. Taking one thug out at a time, the ship carrying the product is then pounced on by another crew of thugs who slaughter all the men on the ship. As the boat comes close to making dock, the Punisher watches from high above. The attackers then jump the next family at the dock and slaughter them one by one until Frank is forced to join in on the fight, getting shot at repeatedly. He evades the bullets, then casually starts obliterating all his enemies. Not wanting the dope to make it onto the street, he takes out the driver of the van, causing it to go swimming. However, Frank cops a knife in his chest and also falls into the water below. The following day, the cops discover over $600 million worth of dope and multiple dead assailants, all from different families. The Punisher is still alive though, and retreats to his Batcave to fix his wounds in a very harsh way. Elsewhere, Franco and the other heads of the crime families know that Lady Tanaka, the head of the Yakuza, was the person who stole their dope. Franco has decided to invite them for a quick meeting, and after the formalities, Lady Tanaka gets right to it. She practically calls Franco a fraud and his soldiers weak, as per their demonstration last night. She wants a partnership where Franco will oversee everything while the Japanese will resume the role of executive administration of investments and financial services, demonstrating she is not f***ing around. She wants a 75-25 split in profit. The Punisher listens to the whole conversation and also hears Franco telling his crew,
"Only one thing we can. We go to war."
The detectives in the meantime attempt using technology to locate the Punisher. Jake's entire time searching for the man has only led him to a knife and a ton of bullets. Sam's computer comes back with information stating that Frank Castle is most likely underneath the surface rather than above. And now starts the gang wars. The Yakuza play it dirty and begin kidnapping kids, murdering nannies, and whatever else they need to do. Shake goes to pay his friend a visit in the meantime, who spawns out of nowhere. The Punisher is told that the crime families and the Yakuza believe him to be dead, which may be of great advantage to him. Frank is then told that the crime boss's children are being held as ransom, but he doesn't really care too much, but Shake tells him off.
I punish the guilty.
And as a result, the innocent now suffer. Let's do something!
The crime family are pissed at the current turn of events when Franco tells them a story on Lady Tanaka. When they were young, she and her brother were inseparable up until she joined the Yakuza. As a test of loyalty and to become the head of the organization, the other leaders wanted her to kill her brother, and she did it without hesitation. With some of the crime bosses wanting to go to the meeting with Lady Tanaka, Franco refuses to go. At the meeting point, which looks like a samurai party, they all stop training and bow to the elite commanders. They head to Lady Tanaka's office where her adopted daughter is hanging out. Upon receiving the ransom money for the children, Franco's son isn't playing nice with the other kids and starts a fight. Lady Tanaka then arrives and tells the children they can go home very soon. Handing out lollies, Tommy pushes her but gets slammed to the ground. Clearly trying to cause a scene, the Yakuza take him away. At an underground casino, meanwhile, a woman walks inside while the Punisher waits on the rooftop. He loads his arsenal and breaks the glass roof open. With no hesitation, he begins killing some Yakuza members and tells one of them that he will cost them money every day and leaves him be. Shooting the entire place, he holds down the trigger until all machines, cards, bottles, and everything else is destroyed to nothing but a crisp. Some while later, Jake and Sam arrive at the scene and see the men there remaining silent. But upon ripping up the man's shirt, they know the Yakuza is now involved. Jake is then told the children of the crime families have been abducted, with the Punisher being the lead suspect. Jake doesn't believe it, however, because the Punisher had 2 reasons why he would never cross that line. The Punisher, still writhing with pain inside, takes Jake to the suspected place where the kids are being held. Frank tells his friend to stay put for the time being while he goes into an abandoned fair to find the children. Not seeing a single person in sight, he parks his bike and readies himself for confrontation, but something seems very off. Out of nowhere, the Yakuza come in great numbers, causing Frank to shoot and toss grenades in their direction. The remaining men are forced to get into one-on-one combat with the Punisher that doesn't end too well for them. Frank attempts to escape for the time being but is problematically thrown off his bike and surrounded by the enemy. They all have a turn in hitting him despite fighting back as best as he can. In the end though, Lady Tanaka's daughter reveals herself to him just before he passes out. Awakening soon after, he is chained up and is approached by Lady Tanaka herself. She claims that the underground casino being destroyed cost her $2 million. Torturing the Punisher, he stays strong and holds true to himself, saying he doesn't give a shit. The next part of the torture is to hurt Shake. However, Frank is unfazed and keeps his mouth shut. Lady Tanaka then leaves for an appointment and Frank tells her to have a nice day. While Shake is being played with, Frank loosens his chains and quickly takes out the men around him, only leaving one. Forcing the man to tell him where the kids are being held, he quickly spills his guts and is left to die. The detectives in the meantime search the underground sewers to find any sort of evidence on Frank. There, Jake confesses that everyone had given up on him when he became a bad drinker as a new cop, but Frank was the only one that helped, the only one who believed in him and got him back onto his feet. The crime families in the meantime await Lady Tanaka and the return of their children. With Franco not attending the meeting, he seems to have made the right call. Lady Tanaka couldn't care less for their useless lives and makes them all suffer. The last remaining man spits in her face, which results in copping a bullet. The scene then cuts to the Punisher stealing a random bus off of the street and towards the children. The Yakuza in the meantime wake up all the children and escort them away when the Punisher attacks. Killing the immediate threat and setting the children free, he tells them he will get them all home safe. Walking them all into the bus, Frank is told they took Tommy away and he goes to save him. While the other Yakuza men see what's the holdup, Tommy is freed from his cell. On the way to the bus, they find one of the girls and the Punisher gets into a fight. Tommy helps Frank escape but gets stuck inside himself. Not wanting to risk all the kids' lives, he escapes in the bus. The Yakuza obviously give chase and attempt to block off the street. Frank couldn't care less though and runs right through them while also getting rid of a stray. As 2 carloads of men approach from beside them, the men attempt to jump on the bus but the kids push them off. Frank decides to play it smart and ram into the goons, pushing them towards their fiery deaths. The last carload approaches again and shoots at Frank. But upon seeing a battalion of cops nearby, they flee the scene and the Punisher stops the bus right in front of them. Opening the doors, all the children are taken to safety and Frank walks out with the last child and is arrested on the spot. Jake gets wind of this and heads straight to the police department. He is finally reunited with his old friend who isn't quite the same as before.
Frank is dead, alright?
Jake tries understanding the Punisher's logic, which is simply, if you're guilty, you're dead. Jake is quite upset that Frank never came to him for help and calls him a sick murderer with over a 125 body count. The 2 men get quite upset and physical with each other, causing Jake to leave angrily. The Punisher begins remembering the good days he had with his kids until they were killed. The news quickly catches on to Frank Castle being the Punisher and state he is being charged with 125 counts of first-degree murder. On the way to court to receive his sentence, Sam tells Frank off for being a piece of shit to his friend Jake. Seems Jake resigned after being broken-hearted, and Sam guilt-trips Frank, who says to call him. However, the armored transport vehicle is attacked. The thugs attacking break into the truck and put the Punisher to sleep. Once he wakes up, it would appear Franco had freed him, who tells him off the bat that his family was never supposed to be killed. Franco desperately asks the Punisher for his service in rescuing his young son. When Frank refuses, Jake is brought into the picture. Tommy's life for Jake's is Franco's only deal, and the Punisher finally agrees to doing it, but only after threatening Franco. I personally find it quite weird that the head of the criminals and the Punisher are working together. Not wanting body armor cause he's a full-blown lunatic, Frank places a bomb on the power of the building that will go off soon enough. Jake in the meantime tells his captor he needs to have a leak. His captor goes to walk him away when Jake asks a funny question.
Is an IQ test required for this job?
Back at the Yakuza headquarters, the duo take out the guard for the elevator and are officially in the base. Blasting another man in the lobby, the two men make their way upstairs. In the elevator, Franco tells Frank there is a limit to revenge. Seems the 125 kill count isn't enough for the Punisher though, and with that the doors open to an entire group of people who are shot into the next life. Everyone attempting to make a stand is killed on the spot, and the Punisher is seething for more kills. Shake accidentally presses the detonation device and causes the explosion to knock out the power prematurely. The darkness, however, is the Punisher's ally. The duo decide to split up and find wherever they are hiding Tommy. The two elite fighters then jump Frank, and seem to be quite strong adversaries. Nonetheless, the Punisher fights with pure rage and he takes out the first general. The second one beats the pulp out of Frank when Shake activates a second bomb and disables all the elevators. Frank uses this to kill the second attacker and Shake escapes the underground. Jake heads right to the Yakuza headquarters and finds the Punisher's knife outside the building. Inside though, Franco is shot through the walls by attackers who are then killed. He then spots his son running away and chases them as Jake is told the elevators need 5 minutes to work again. Lady Tanaka and Franco meet face to face once again when Tanaka's daughter appears from behind, who is spear tackled by the Punisher. The two have a fair one-on-one fight with each other until the bitch cheats and uses a knife. However, she is yet to realize Frank has a massive pain tolerance, and he keeps the fight going and eventually puts the brat to a sleep she will never wake from. As the power kicks back in, Franco and Tanaka find each other again. However, to save his son's life, Franco lowers his weapon and goes on his knees. Tanaka orders him to do the unthinkable to save his son's life, and he goes to do it. However, the Punisher barges in and kills Lady Tanaka with one swift blow. As Jake makes his way up, Franco is reunited with his son. On his way out, Tommy is told to wait outside while his father helps the Punisher. As his son walks out, Franco holds a gun to the Punisher and thanks him for wiping out all the competition. In a couple of years, he will be the most powerful crime syndicate and Tommy will take over the family business. Just as the Punisher is about to get shot, Tommy walks in, giving Frank Castle the chance to kick the gun away. This results in the two men using their bare hands, fighting as their lives depend on it. Franco has the upper hand for a while, until he is shot and saved by his vest. Going to kill Frank, Tommy tells his father to stop and gets pushed away. As the two men fight over the gun, a shot is heard, and it would appear the Punisher has made the final shot to kill Franco. Tommy, horrified at his father dying in front of him, picks up the gun.
I'm gonna kill you.
Good. You won't grow up to be like him. Come on. Do it.
Split up.
You're a good boy, Tommy. Grow up to be a good man. Because if not, I'll be waiting. I ask him if what I'm doing is right or wrong. And until I get one, I'll be out here, waiting, watching.
The Punisher 2004 opens up in Tampa, Florida. There, a car pulls up to a shipping dock and two men get out of their car. Mickey leads his friend Bobby Saint to an arms deal. A man named Otto Krieg brokers the deal and looks the two lads dead in their eyes. Having a look at the money, the big boss comes down and we have a look at the product. Out of nowhere, the FBI raid the scene from all fronts. Everyone is surrounded and those who retaliate in the slightest way are gunned down on the spot. Mickey, still alive, looks at his friend's lifeless corpse in horror. The dead bodies are then taken when out of nowhere, Otto comes back from the dead. It would appear that the man is Frank Castle, an FBI agent that was undercover. With this being Frank Castle's last day on the force as he is retiring, all the officers say their last farewell. One of the men tells the captain that the kid that died was Howard Saint's son, a big problem for them. As Frank leaves, the scene cuts to a frickin' gorgeous mansion where Howard's other son John approaches his father and mother who dropped from the bad news. Mickey is immediately bailed out of jail and stopped on the road. The men there take him to an empty club and beat the shit out of him. Quentin Glass, the right-hand man of Howard Saint, wants to know why the hell Mickey and Bobby went to an arms deal. Seems Bobby went on his own accord and wanted to join the gangster life. Pleading for the men to not kill him, Mickey confesses the man who brokered the deal was Otto, a man who died in the crossfire. Howard isn't too happy at hearing this and tells Mickey he is part responsible. The other man responsible was his subordinate that was supposed to be watching Bobby. This thug is shot multiple times until he tells Howard that his son wanted to go alone to impress his dad. The man is killed on the spot, and the Saints leave the corpse in the room. Elsewhere, Maria Castle is packing up when she hears a knock on the door. Seeing her beloved Frank waiting for her, he promises that this was his last job and it's over. Going outside, Frank tells his son Will that this is the last time they're moving. Planning to head to London, he promises to tell Will why they had to move so much when he's older. At the morgue, Howard sees his dead son on the table and is mortified at the sight. Howard asks Jimmy Weeks who Otto is as well as his accomplices, but the agent refuses to disclose information, causing Howard to leave. The next day, Quentin tells his boss the whole underground world is looking for information on Otto Krieg as per the cash reward he has offered. In Puerto Rico, Frank and his son are having a nice swim when they join Maria as well as Frank's parents. That night, the entire family on both sides reunite and celebrate. After Frank's dad is finished, Maria looks at her husband, and we know exactly what that look means. Frank walks off, however, and Maria chases him only for Frank to grab her, and I can't show you the rest. The next morning, the Saints and all their accomplices finish up at the cemetery, and Howard isn't too happy. Quentin hands his boss a package and they discover that Otto was actually Frank Castle, a senior agent. Everything about him was fake, including his death. They also know he is in Puerto Rico and is going to London in a week, so Quentin goes to pay him a visit. However, Howard's wife, Livia Saint, stops him.
His family, his whole family.
Some while later, Frank and his family are sitting and enjoying their time together. Will decided to buy a shirt with a skull on it for his father. Unbeknownst to them, though, a speedboat approaches and a group of armed men make their way to the family hangout. With all the extended relatives drinking and just vibing, the goons close in. With all of them being locked and loaded, Frank goes to talk to his dad in his little armory when they hear a bullet being fired.
Get down, buddy, get down! Get over here!
With Frank loading up as his family is picked off, he kills the first intruder. With many more approaching and killing at will, Frank's dad joins the fight. The cold-blooded murderers kill anything they see move, and Frank does the same to them. Going to see where his wife and child is, a thug hides behind them. Maria and Will make a plan to run for the jeep while Frank's dad is shot. Frank immediately retaliates and is forced to fight off multiple men with his dad's aid. His wife and child are then spotted and quickly escape in their car. The thugs also give chase while Frank finishes off the immediate danger. He jumps on a bike and follows the goons while his wife drives and speeds as best she can. The two cars collide with one another until Maria actually pulls off a good maneuver to get away. Her tires are problematically shot at though, and her car flips multiple times and crashes. Getting out of the vehicle, the two are in deep trouble and attempt to run away. As Maria screams for help, no one answers and she runs to the boat. The thugs chase after them though and kill both of them when they are presented with the chance. Frank arrives soon after to find his beloved as well as his son dead. The goons come back for round 2 but have no idea who they're messing with. Frank kills their driver even while being injured but is eventually defeated. With the men there knowing Frank has lost and his entire family has been wiped out, he is whacked over and over. Eventually, John takes off his glasses and says his parents send their regards while putting a final bullet into Frank. Putting gas or petrol or whatever you guys call it, they light up the dock and send Frank into the water. With that, the gangsters have completed their mission, satisfied their revenge, and leave. Some while later, Frank, still alive, passes out. A stranger finds him busted up and quickly gets him on his boat. Back in Florida, Mickey works as a concierge for the Saint crime family. Howard and his wife arrive and hand Mickey the newsletter of Frank Castle's death as well as his family's. Inside the club, Livia says the score is settled, and for some reason, Howard tells Quentin to dance with his wife, then starts looking at them both with jealousy. Later that night, Howard hands his wife some jewelry, and all I'm going to say is that looks damn expensive. After a couple of weeks, Frank comes back to the horrific crime scene to find it empty. Looking around the place and inside the now empty house, he knows deep down that he brought this to his family, that his job has caught up to him and led to the death of his beautiful wife and son as well as 30 other relatives. With nothing left to live for, he finds the shirt his son gave him and will now be the advocate of death. Once in Florida, Frank makes himself a makeshift base with an artillery by his side. In the morning, Frank prepares for a blown-out war and makes himself a Batmobile. Making everything he needs for the upcoming battles, his car is so loud that surrounding neighbors in his apartment want to have a look. A woman named Joan as well as 2 men just watch Frank from a distance. As night envelops the land, Frank jumps into his vehicle and gets to work. The first person he goes after is Mickey. After abducting him, Mickey says he won't snitch. That was a bad idea, especially when Frank pulls out a blowtorch. Explaining how pain will register in his body, he begins to torture the lad when the 2 neighbors hear the screams and decide to stay out of it. Mickey, on the other hand, starts blurting away and tells Frank any discussion involving the Saints' business involves 2 Cubans. The Toro brothers control all the women and gambling up and down the Gulf Coast. They give the dirty money to Howard, who transports it to his banks in Grand Cayman, who clean it and bring it back. Releasing Mickey, Frank asks if he'd like to help him, and for some reason Mickey agrees to it. He begins by saying Howard is a man of habits and so is his wife. The wife is the one that ordered the hit on Frank's family. The other main members are Howard's son John as well as his right-hand Quentin. Frank the lunatic decides to get his tombstone and throw it right in front of Howard's golf course. Back at the FBI headquarters, Frank tells off the chief as it's been 5 months since the attack and no one is in jail. They try talking themselves out of it, but Frank just walks away in disappointment. Getting to work, Frank attacks one of Howard's bases of operation. Infiltrating the building and heading to the top level where the money is laundered, he holds the thugs at gunpoint and makes them wheel the money out. Making them fill up quite a bit of cash in a briefcase, he opens the window and tells them to toss the money outside. Before you know it, everyone sees the flying cash and runs to collect it all. It's quite hilarious what people would do for money, but it doesn't go unnoticed. As two men approach Frank, he strikes fear into their hearts without pulling out a weapon. But with a good old Western standoff with the two guards, Frank takes them out. The news immediately reports the double homicide while other stations speak on the return of Frank Castle. The two neighbors realize the man next door to them is a straight killer and shouldn't be messed with. The bozos make themselves look like fools, and the scene cuts a couple of hours later to Frank reminiscing and in deep thought about his son and wife. Howard, in the meantime, tells off his troops for letting Frank survive. They know their best course of action is to find him and reunite him with his family. Quentin mentions how the Toro brothers will arrive soon, and Howard is in trouble. When the brothers arrive, Howard tries to play off all the lost money, but they make quite a few sarcastic jokes and are angry. Stating they lost $50 million, Howard vows he'll protect the next shipment with his life. At the apartment, meanwhile, Jones X is losing his mind when the other men tell him he needs to back off. This immediately results in a bit of a fight when Frank opens his door. All it takes is one punch and the man runs for his life. The two lads go to put some ice on a wound, and Joan personally thanks Frank for helping her. Introducing herself and the other two lads as Dave and Bumpo, Joan tells Frank she's sorry for his loss. This deeply touches his heart and he goes to complete his mission of vengeance. The first thing he does is break his way into Livia's car and look through her purse. Seeing the diamond earrings, he decides to call Quentin and tell him he has evidence of some extra activities he's been doing on the side. Not knowing that Frank is on the other line, he is given a time and place to be to receive the photos. Frank then parks Livia's car in a no parking zone, which attracts a parking ticket. Quentin soon arrives with $5,000 in cash for the photos, but Frank drives away and parks the car in the same spot as before. Quentin decides to leave after waiting so long, and Howard asks his son if he's seen Quentin. Mickey spawns from nowhere and tells Howard he saw Quentin at a hotel earlier. Waiting some time, Howard sees his wife and Quentin getting along quite well and thinks something happened between them. The next morning, we move to the diner where Joan works. There, a random stranger walks in with a guitar, but he looks damn suspicious to me. The stranger and Frank have a silent stare-off when the man suddenly pulls out a guitar and starts playing it. The man literally has a teardrop tattoo but is playing a guitar, a weird sight to see. After finishing, he walks up to Frank and says he'll play that song at his funeral, then leaves the diner. Sometime later, the same man appears in the rear view and tries to kill Frank but fails. Frank jumps a bridge but proceeds to get into an accident and completely wrecks his car. The stranger approaches once again and mocks Frank when he shoots a knife and kills the man. Deciding to steal the car for the time being, the scene cuts to John Saint unloading the money for the Toro brothers. However, he discovers a bomb on the boat which detonates and destroys all the cash on board. Frank looks at John from a distance and leaves, which makes Howard all the angrier. The Toro brothers arrive and start making threats toward Howard, who tells them there were 14 shipments and only one went bad. After a little more arguing, the brothers leave and Quentin is told to get a hold of the Russian. Back at the apartments, Frank hears a knock and gets up to see that Dave is worried for Joan as her ex is back. Frank gets ready to kill someone and barges his way into Joan's apartment.
We want you to have dinner with us.
Agreeing, he finally eats a proper meal for the first time when Joan wants to do an activity where everyone shares what they're grateful for. After Joan, Dave, and Bumpo share their thoughts, it goes to Frank, who only says he's thankful for dinner. The two men go to pick up some dessert to finish off the night. Joan tells Frank she knows what it's like to try and lose your memories, but Frank is on another spectrum of emotions, specifically the ones aligned with revenge and destruction. The Three Stooges, in the meantime, make dessert when someone knocks on Frank's door. Opening it, we see a frickin' giant who attacks Frank. Seems a knife going into him doesn't really faze him too much, and Frank is in some deep trouble. Getting thrown around the place and trying to use anything around him to injure the beast, it doesn't work. Frank decides to throw a grenade in the man's direction, but he hits it back to Frank, who hides in a tub. Still alive but very injured, Frank is tossed around the place and literally goes through a wall. After getting his head pounded by the fridge door, getting his gun dented, and getting thrown through another wall, he gets tossed into Bumpo's apartment. Throwing boiling water onto the brute, Frank's spear tackles the man down the stairs, and the trio have a look to see the man dead. Passing out as well, the trio take Frank back into his apartment and need to give him some emergency care. While Dave gives Frank a bottle that's almost consumed in a second, Joan applies some first aid care. Soon enough, John Saint alongside 3 men arrive at the apartments. Seeing their dead man on the ground level, they head upstairs to see Bumpo and Dave sitting awkwardly in Frank's room. While Joan and Frank hide, Quentin asks the 2 boys where Mr. Castle is, and they remain silent. Quentin begins looking around the room but finds nothing and wants to get to know Dave better. Having a weird-ass conversation with him, Quentin pulls out some pliers and wants an answer. But as he refuses to do so, Quentin rips off Dave's eyebrow piercing, causing him to scream in agony. The torture continues though, and Dave somehow manages to stay strong, which makes Quentin believe he and Bumpo don't know where Frank is. Leaving one man on the scene, Howard tells his crew to close the club and call everyone in. Both Frank and Joan come out of the secret compartment when Bumpo tells them an op is on the lookout outside. In a great amount of pain, both physically and psychologically, Frank needs to end this once and for all. Approaching the thug from behind, he is taken out with one quick hit, and Frank comes back to see Dave all busted up. Frank is confused as to why Dave protected him and didn't even know him. Dave simply says that Frank is one of them and their family. Frank is touched by this statement, and now more than ever, he is willing to destroy the whole Saint bloodline. Joan begins crying at the scene of so many guns and thinks Frank will die if he goes out tonight. Nonetheless, all he has to say is, if you want peace, be ready to go to war. Once again, Frank jumps into Livia's car and uses her phone to call Quentin. Using a muffled voice, he demands $10,000 for the photos and gives a location and time. Next, Mickey is called by Frank and told it is time. Mickey goes to Howard and hands him the ticket his wife got at a hotel last Thursday. The same hotel Quentin was seen at by Mickey. Howard takes the keys to Quentin's house off Mickey and wants the last month's phone bill as well. As Howard leaves his house and Quentin arrives at the meetup point, Howard goes directly to Quentin's house, believing he and his wife aren't being faithful. But what I find hilarious is the fact that the Punisher placed Livia's earrings on Quentin's bed, which Howard finds. When Quentin returns home, he finds Howard there waiting for him. Howard gets right to the point and accuses Quentin of stealing. Quentin swears he's never taken $1, but Howard says this has nothing to do with money. He then punches his old friend multiple times before stabbing him. Claiming they were brothers, Howard continues until his friend is lifeless on the ground. Now this is where I am intrigued. Livia comes home to find her husband ransacking the house. Saying he knows about her relationship with Quentin through the phone history, she tries to explain that it is impossible. Seeing Quentin's lifeless corpse, Livia tries explaining that it wasn't her, but Howard doesn't want to hear it. He takes her outside and Mickey laughs at how well the plan is going. Inside their car, Livia begs her husband to be rational, but his ears are turned off. Grabbing her, she pleads and screams, but when Howard shows her the earring he found at Quentin's place, she is beyond confused. Howard throws her off the bridge and onto the ground where a train comes and sends her to hell. Howard heads to the club where all his men wait for him and offers them $50,000 to hunt Frank and another $50,000 to kill him. John then asks why his father looks a bit off, and all he tells his son is that his mother left and took the train. The scene then cuts to Frank Castle talking to himself and convincing himself that in some circumstances the law is inadequate, and for justice to prevail, he must venture outside the law and punish the wrongdoers.
Hey Eddie, more champagne on the double.
Coming right up.
Upstairs, the crew is enjoying their time, not knowing that Frank has come to kill them all. Killing anyone that dares flinch in his presence, he is wounded. Still pushing forward with the shirt that his son had given him, he is shot again and again and again, but still manages to kill the men that killed his family. Howard, in the meantime, attempts to escape when his man triggers a bomb. Still standing through nothing but sheer determination, the Punisher isn't satisfied quite yet. He finds John Saint stuck and forces him to hold a bomb that will detonate if he drops it.
Howard Saint! Howard Saint! Took everything from me. You killed my son. Both of them.
Having a good old Western standoff, Howard stands no chance and lays down on the ground. Frank confesses he tricked Howard into killing his best friend and his wife, and now it's his turn. Tying Howard up to a car, Frank puts it in drive and it explodes alongside his entire empire, killing Howard, the Saints, their money, and everything they ever stood for. Today is the day the Punisher will never be forgotten. Once he returns back to his apartment, Frank stares at an image of his wife and son. Knowing that nothing will fill his empty void, revenge and punishment is a good substitute. In the morning, Frank goes to leave and tells Joan he left something in the cupboard for all of them. Having more work to do as the Punisher, he takes his leave. Soon enough, Dave and Bumpo return home. They head to the cupboard Frank was speaking of and find hundreds of thousands if not millions of dollars for them. And with that, this epic movie comes to a beautiful and sad end.
Frank Castle is dead.
Call me the Punisher.
Punisher Warzone opens with the Punisher aka Frank Castle watching the news. He sees that, yet again, the city's most ruthless crime boss, Gaetano Cesare, who is responsible for the deaths of over 200 people, has walked free from his trial. He turns around and stares into his large weapons cache, ranging from submachine guns to grenades. The next scene shows a large party being held for Cesare. All of his capos show up, along with 2 FBI agents stalking them from the woods. There is a private meeting with Cesare's nephew Billy, who tells him about a shipment of drugs coming in. Cesare begins to chew him out, saying they don't deal with that sort of stuff. He gets personal and mentions Billy's brother, which escalates into a tense moment as they both draw guns. Eventually, they calm down and head downstairs to eat, while Billy stays behind. Outside the mansion, someone takes out one of the guards. It's the Punisher. He cuts the lights and runs inside. He jumps on the table while everyone is eating, opens up a flare, blinding everyone. Instantly, he cuts off the head of Cesare and also takes out his wife, who had drawn a gun. He throws 2 knives, hitting 2 criminals in the head, then stabs another. As the lights switch back on, he draws 2 pistols and shoots the rest of the attendees at the table. As more men begin to burst into the room, the Punisher jumps onto the chandelier, spinning on it while blasting a submachine gun in every direction, killing the men. Billy and his crew, still upstairs, flee the scene, surviving. Meanwhile, the Punisher kicks a chair into someone's head, reloads his pistol and takes out another 4 men. As he leaves, the FBI agent Cesare ambushes him and points his weapon at him. After realizing who he is, the agent gives Frank his keys and tells him to go after Billy, who is heading to the docks. At the docks, Billy and 3 others enter a warehouse, closely watched from afar by the Punisher. Inside, Billy is talking to other capos. He says he's grateful the Punisher killed the others. Now he can take over. Outside, the Punisher uses a crossbow to disable one of the guards, then gets the jump on the other. He makes his way in, climbing upward, hoping to ambush them. He spots another guard and opens fire, killing him. Little does he know the man was an undercover agent, and 2 FBI agents are listening in from a van nearby. He jumps down and gets the drop on a capo named Pitsy. Billy sees Frank and opens fire, but the Punisher outmaneuvers him and throws him into a vat of bottles. He switches it on and the machine starts grinding. Billy begins to scream in pain as he's dragged in. The Punisher is spotted by other men who open fire. Frank pulls out 2 fully automatic pistols and returns fire, hitting a few. He runs out of ammo and heads back upstairs. Looking over a body, he realizes he shot an FBI agent. At that moment, the FBI swarm the building and arrest everyone. But Frank manages to escape. He returns to his HQ, sickened by what he has just done. Back in the warehouse, the FBI find Billy still alive, but barely recognizable. Days later, the Punisher is watching the funeral of the man he shot from afar, clearly deeply regretful. An FBI agent has a conversation with the deceased's wife, Agent Paul. He promises to find the Punisher and bring him to justice. While Frank is there, he visits the graves of his wife and kids and has something of a mental breakdown. Later, Agent Paul is sent to work with the police precinct in New York. He talks with the captain and confronts him about letting the Punisher go unpunished. The captain fires back, telling him there's a terrorist-level threat imminent in New York and they can't be worrying about Frank right now. However, they grow tired of Paul and assign him to the Punisher task force, which consists of nobody but him and one other man, Detective Soap. Paul and Soap begin to talk, and Soap shares everything they've learned about Frank. He tells him about his past and how Frank's family was murdered. He says he's close to catching him and just needs a little more help from someone like Paul to finish it. Meanwhile, back at his HQ, Frank is visited by Micro, who checks in on him and drops off several weapons. Frank pays him an absurd amount of money and says he's retiring. Micro tells him the accidental death wasn't his fault and urges him to keep going. Frank brushes him off and wants to be left alone in silence. Next, Billy and Pitsy are talking. Billy's face is bandaged up and a doctor comes to see him. He tells Billy that his entire face was destroyed beyond repair. When the bandages are removed, everyone in the room looks on in disgust, including one of his capos, Pitsy's son Ink, who throws up. They leave the room for a bit and come back to find the plastic surgeon dead. Billy's face is now stitched together in a horrifying manner. During a car ride, Billy tells his capos that he's going to enlist the help of his brother James to kill Frank. Ink winces at this and protests, referring to him by his nickname, Looney Bin Jim. Billy turns around and chokes him, saying his name is James and that they're all going to kill Frank together. He also tells them that his old self is dead, and from now on they're to call him Jigsaw. In a mental asylum, we're introduced to James, who is maximally restrained. The caretakers begin mocking him when out of nowhere. Jigsaw enters the room. He kills one of the doctors and frees James, who rapidly begins eating one of the guards that had taunted him. Before leaving, they open the doors to all of the prisoners, setting them free. Meanwhile, Frank visits a house and begins talking to a little girl. Her mother, Angela, comes outside and pulls a gun on him. This is the family of the FBI agent Frank accidentally killed. He throws a bag of money onto the ground, but the mother doesn't want it and starts berating Frank, threatening to shoot him. Frank guides the gun toward his heart and tells her to shoot, accepting his fate. At the last second, the daughter talks to her mother, who changes her mind, telling Frank to take his money and go. With Billy and James, they go to a penthouse that was owned by Cesare. Jigsaw catches his reflection in a mirror and begins to cry, only to be comforted by his brother, who starts destroying every mirror in sight. They go upstairs to have a meeting with the Russians, who are concerned about Frank Castle. They question Billy's leadership and his ability to bring in their product. One of the Russians gets into a tiff with James and spits at him, prompting Billy to immediately stab the man with a piece of glass. Guns are drawn, but the Russian leader calms the situation and agrees to trust Billy to handle the product. Some sort of biological object connected to the terrorist threat the FBI and Homeland Security have been monitoring. Next, Frank visits Micro. They begin to talk, and Micro shows him a stash of weapons he's been holding. Frank interrupts and tells him he's going out of town and won't be coming back. Micro tries to convince him otherwise, warning that Billy is still alive and might target the dead agent's family. Frank reluctantly agrees and asks where to find him. He's pointed toward a gang leader working with Jigsaw, known as McGinty. Frank, again reluctantly, agrees to go with an ex-gangster who now works for Micro to track McGinty down. In the following scene, Soap tells Paul that if he wants to catch Frank, he might need to sit in his car and listen to the police scanner, his only real hope of finding him at a crime scene. Meanwhile, James, Billy, Pitsy, and Ink stalk Angela and her daughter. They follow her into the house and quietly enter behind her. At the same time, Frank and the ex-convict Carlos beat information out of someone at a bar to find McGinty's whereabouts. They learn he's planning to hit a convenience store and decide to catch him there. McGinty and his boys hit the corner store. As one of them is running through the air, Frank shoots him with a rocket. Another is taken out with a sniper rifle. Frank injures McGinty and demands the whereabouts of Jigsaw. McGinty spills where Billy is and reveals he's heading to Angela's house. Soap and Paul arrive at the crime scene just in time to see the Punisher throw McGinty off the roof, killing him. Frank runs off and Paul gives chase, hoping to catch him. Meanwhile, at Angela's house, Jigsaw and his crew bust in. They demand the money her husband supposedly took before he died and begin tearing the house apart. Paul eventually catches up to Frank and gets the jump on him. However, Frank disarms him and a fight breaks out. Paul briefly overpowers Castle, but the Punisher regains control and incapacitates him. While both are recovering, Paul handcuffs himself to Frank. Frank tells him they need to get to Angela's house. Now, a police car pulls up to Angela's house. When the officers ring the doorbell, James answers and lures them inside, where he bashes one cop's head in with a bat and the other is stabbed. Soap, Paul, and Frank are in a car racing toward Angela's house, with Soap finding the situation strangely amusing. When they arrive, Paul jumps out and runs inside. He orders Soap to keep Frank in the car, but Soap disobeys and lets him go. Inside, Paul finds Angela being held at gunpoint and immediately drops his gun to ensure her safety. Upstairs, Billy and James open a safe and realize that none of their money is inside the house. They begin to freak out while Frank makes his way around the back. Ink is sent to investigate, and Frank punches a hole through his head. This distraction allows Paul to subdue Pitsy and place him in cuffs. As he's about to call it in, Frank shoots Pitsy in the head, killing him instantly, prompting the detective to scream at him. James and Billy begin to open fire on Paul, who is joined by Soap. They run out of ammo and Paul holds them both at gunpoint, ordering them not to move. Castle takes Angela and her daughter back to his HQ. They begin to talk and Frank reminisces with the daughter about the family he once had. Meanwhile, Paul places James and Billy into handcuffs and they're escorted away in a cop car. At the precinct, the FBI shows up, saying Billy has information he's willing to trade. He stresses the importance of what he knows, claiming half the city will be dead after tonight if they don't listen. Later, Billy and James are sent to the docks to retrieve the biological weapon. The deal goes down and the cops interfere as planned, arresting the Russians, though not before the Russian leader threatens Billy, warning that his father will kill him. The FBI head talks with Billy, revealing that both he and James have been granted immunity. They're also given intel on Frank, including the location of his associate Micro. Back with Frank, Carlos arrives to watch over Angela and her daughter while Castle handles the last piece of business. The next day, Billy and James are plotting to kill Castle. They talk about building an army first, then the next step is to kill. All the while, Micro is tied up in the back, struggling. Frank arrives at Micro's house where he finds Micro's mother shot in the head. He immediately leaves, knowing exactly where Billy and James are headed. With Carlos and the girls, the two brothers get the jump on them, brutally chopping Carlos with an axe. The girls try to run but fail and are captured. Frank arrives too late, finding a note with the location of the girls and a barely breathing Carlos. Carlos begs Frank not to let him die like that. Frank honors his request, pulls out his pistol, says a few final words and puts him out of his misery. Later, Castle and Paul meet at a cathedral. Frank tells him Angela and her daughter have been taken. Paul informs him that Billy and James now have immunity, meaning the police won't be able to get involved. Meanwhile, Billy and James walk through a ghetto area and enter several clubs, speaking to large groups trying to enlist help to build an army of their own. They succeed, amassing huge numbers. Soap and Paul meet with the Russians and explain how Billy and James are responsible for the incarceration of their brothers. Enraged, the Russians vow to take care of them. Frank stalks the location where Billy is keeping the girls. Inside is a huge army, locked, loaded, and ready to kill the Punisher. By nightfall, the Russians pull up at the building. They pretend to be there to help kill the Punisher and are let in immediately. Paul tells Frank he's going inside with him. Castle knocks him out. An effort to save Paul from getting himself killed. Inside, the Russians arm up with weapons and open fire on everybody. The other side fires back and a huge gunfight ensues. The Punisher scales the outside of the building and dives through a window, landing on the 4th floor. He begins to trek up the stairs, unloading his automatic weapon on 4 men before throwing a grenade to clear the hallway. He pushes forward and is shot in the vest, falling to the ground. He kills the shooter behind him with his pistol, then dual wields his handguns and takes out another 3 before clearing the floor. Everything goes silent. He walks up to a door and on the other side 9 men are waiting with guns trained on it. Frank fires his grenade launcher through the door, killing them all instantly. James hears the commotion and rushes to confront him. Frank blasts another 7 people and heads toward the elevator. James somehow gets the jump on him and uses everything he can. He even bites Castle. The Punisher throws him through a glass wall, but James recovers and begins teeing off on him. This only enrages Frank, who fights back, beating James bloody. James escapes and runs back to his brother Billy. The Punisher follows closely behind and finds Billy and James holding the girls and Micro at gunpoint. Frank drops his gun and Billy shoots him in the vest, once, twice, 3 times, then a 4th. Billy throws Frank a gun and tells him he can shoot either Micro or Angela. Whoever he doesn't choose will be set free. Micro pleads with Frank to shoot him and save the child. Instead, Frank pulls up and shoots James in the head. Billy immediately kills Micro in retaliation. Frank runs to the girls and throws himself in front of a bullet to protect them, then disarms Billy. They fight brutally and Frank beats him senseless. He rushes to free the girls, then returns to Billy, impaling him with a pole and burning him alive. Frank escapes the building badly injured. Paul tells him to leave quickly before the police arrive. Angela stops Frank and tells him her husband believed he was one of the good guys. This comforts him. Frank says goodbye to the child and leaves with Soap. The movie ends with Frank disappearing into the night while Soap is left talking to himself. Out of nowhere, someone tries to rob him, but the Punisher appears nearby, gun in hand, and kills the mugger instantly. Thanks for staying until the end as usual. I have a lot of requests of different franchises and my team is working day and night to get them out as soon as possible. Thank you as always, and I'll catch you on the next one.